Welcome everybody. Today we'll be talking about objects in JavaScript. First off, what is an object? Well, an object is a data type, which is a kind of data that can be stored and manipulated. You may be more familiar with other data types such as numbers, and strings, and booleans. But objects are a bit different from these other data types in that objects are generally more complex and they contain more information. They contain these other data types usually in key value pairs. To understand this better, let's take a look at this example that I have here. This object, which is called series, right? It's about the ALF series. You may remember it, late 80s, early 90s series. It's made up of a lot of key value pairs called properties. So we have a property here with the key of name and the value of ALF. Same thing with genre, sitcom, etc. So the name is the key. So name would be the key, genre would be the key, released would be the key, and the values are ALF, sitcom in 1986. Just want to note here that you can have strings as value, numbers, booleans, but you can also have functions and arrays. And first question you may have is, how do we access this data? Okay, great, we have this object right here, but how do we get the data? So how do I get ALF? How do I get sitcom out of there? Well, there are two main ways that we can actually access this data. The first is dot notation, and so how is this formed? Well, you use the object name, which is series, followed by a dot, hence the name, and followed by the key name. So the key name here, for example, for the first one, for name, is name, and then it spits back out ALF. We can do that for the next one, series dot, let's see, we have genre, just type that in, we get sitcom, and so on and so forth. So this will give us, it'll spit out all these values here that we have here. But let's take a look at two maybe other cases, particular cases that we have here, where the value isn't actually, it's either a function or an array. So let's take a look at the functions first. So let's see. So the object name, series dot get info. So if we just write get info, well, it'll just give us the value back, which is that function, which isn't usually what we want. What we usually want is for it to run this function. And so the simple difference here is that we would add the parentheses behind it so that it runs the function. And this function is simply logs to the console this sentence right here. Okay, so that is for functions. Let's take a brief look at the arrays as well. So we have characters. Again, if we just do the series.characters, in other words, the object.name.keyname, right here, it would just give us the array, but sometimes we want to get each individual item within this array. Well, like any other array, in JavaScript, it is 0 indexed, so we type in 0 to get the first one, 1 to get the second one, and so on and so forth. So all you would have to do here is type in the object name, followed by the key name, and then we'd have the brackets to get inside of this array. And that is how we would get out the first name of the characters array. Okay, so that is dot notation. Let's take a brief look at bracket notation, which is very similar, slight difference that we have here. So series, again, is our object name. In this case, instead of the dots, we would put in the brackets, and here we would need a string within it, we would need to write the name of the property, right? So for the first one, it would simply be name, right? Spit back out ALF or funny. All right, so series funny, it returns the Boolean true. Okay, so that works with strings, numbers, booleans. But what if we do it with functions? We get the same problem that we had before with the dot notation, right? So let's go with series and then get info. Well, that just spits back out the function. And usually, as we mentioned above, we want to run the function. So the difference here is we would just put the parentheses after the brackets in order to run that function. And let's go back. One last thing. Let's take a look at the arrays. So we have series, characters, right? This again gives us the array. And as we had above, if we want one of the items within the array, again, it's 0 indexed, and we just put the 0 within the brackets. So that is bracket notation. Two main differences here between bracket notation and dot notation, when you should use one or the other. Most of the time they're interchangeable, but there are two main reasons that you would want to use bracket notation, or maybe I should say two scenarios in which you would want to use bracket notation. So let's take a look. So let me come back up here. You know what, instead of series, I'll have to change something here. So let's just call it series 2. This is the second object. And instead of doing name, let's just say name of series, right? So the key in this property right here would be name of series as opposed to name. And that's important. So if we were trying to do this, remember we did with dot notation, you simply do series.name. Actually, let me do series 2. Let's just see what we have here, right? So notice that we have name of series. It has these spaces in there. And this isn't really a valid JavaScript name. So this is going to break when we try to pull alf out of here using dot notation. In other words, you cannot use dot notation. Why? Well, the JavaScript doesn't know what these spaces are. And so it'll try to pull out something that's name, and it won't understand of series. This is just going to break. And so in this case, we will want to use bracket notation, in which we can simply put within the quotes name of series, and we can pull out alf from that way. And this will work, for example, if you are starting with a number, or if you have hyphens inside of the name, whatever sort of name that would be. Generally invalid names in JavaScript would work better with bracket notation. One last thing to take a look here for bracket notation is that you can pass variables inside the brackets. So let's take a look at that. So imagine whatever, we'll just say let test equals, what do we want it to be released? Let's say test is released. So if we tried, let's just do it, let's do series in the bracket notation and test, right? So this is going to pass released through here to test, and you can see it works, right? We get 1986, which is the same with series or series 2, right? No difference there. But if we try to do it with dot notation, as you can see, it's undefined. It doesn't know what this is. It is assuming that this test right here is the key of the key value pair, right? And for series, well, we have no key that is test, right? That doesn't come up here. So it doesn't understand that this is a variable. And so that is an important difference. All right, so great. Now we've taken a look at how we can access the data within an object. There we go. Okay, so clearing the console. So now that we've accessed the data from an object, let's see how we can create an object itself. So as we had before, you can create through the object literal syntax, which is using the curly braces notation. So we have these curly braces right here, and this is one way that we can create an object. Another way we can create an object is through the Object Constructor, which creates an object using the new keyword. So let's try a different one. So let my object equals new object. Right, so this is the Object Constructor. We're newing up an object right there. Okay, so my object exists. It's just an empty object. And then we can pass different properties to this, right? So let's say my object at name equals alf, right? So we're giving the name alf, and then if we bring that back, we can see that we passed this property to the object. You can do the same thing with function with any sort of data type, right? So let's just do my object dot year 1986. Good, and then again, we'll just look at my object, and you can see it passed it through there. So that is the second way of how you can create an object through the object constructor. So we've taken a look at two of the ways of creating an object through the object literal syntax as well as the constructor itself. But we can do it in a different way. So the first two ways are great if you want to just create one or two objects. But if you're really creating a lot of them, it may not be the most efficient way of doing it. And so one thing you can do is instead create a function, sort of a template for these objects, and simply new up that constructor to create another object. So, there we go. And so yeah, so this will be the function character will accept two parameters, the real name and stage name. And so this dot real name equals real name. So when the real name that you passed to the constructor will become real name, and same thing for the stage name, right? Stage name. Okay, so that is the constructor itself. How do we use this? Well, let's just put in an actor. I'm not sure if you guys remember the show, the A-Team, also a great 1980s show. New character. Who we got here? We got Mr. T, right? He was B.A. Baracus. All right, so here what we did was create a new character using the character function, using this constructor right here, and we passed it the two parameters that I wanted, right? So the real name and his stage name. We can do that again with any number of them. Character and here. So let's say we want Dirk. So he was the face man, right? So face man now. Anyway, and then so let's see if we can call these two objects. And yes, we can. So actor 1, and we just pull that information out. So actor 2 as well. So this is maybe a more efficient way of creating the objects. Then in addition to creating the objects and adding the properties, you may be wondering, how do we delete these? Imagine we added one thing that we didn't want to add. How would we go about deleting them? Well, let's just create another object using the little syntax. Whoops. There we go. Again, we'll use the Alf example. All right, so if we look at my object, we got the name as Alf. So we can get that, my object, oops, my name, and we get Alf. But what if we wanted to delete this or remove the name property? We can do that by using the delete command, right? So delete my object name. True. Well, it's deleted. So let's take a look at my object, and as you can see here, it's just an empty object. So we've removed that name property from the object. Then you may be thinking, if we can delete these properties in this way, is there any way to prevent them from being deleted? And you can do that with the object.seal method. So let's try this one again. All right, so you may be thinking, if we can delete the properties to the object, is there any way that we can prevent this from happening? We can actually do that with the object.seal function, a method rather. So here, let's create an object. Let's just say maybe Mr. T object equals, let's just do actor object. And here we'll have name with Mr. T. All right, so we have this actor object, and for example, before we were able to simply delete actor object.name, right? And if we go back to the actor object, we get a blank or rather an empty object. But let's go back and object.name equals Mr. T. So let's reassign it the name, add this property, and then let's call it. Okay, so we see we're back to where we were. And so if we wanted to prevent the name property from being deleted from the actor object, we use the object.seal method. And so inside of here, we'll just simply pass the object that we want to seal, object right here. And now let's try to delete it. And so before, you can see that when we deleted the actor object.name, we got true. This time we should get false. So let's try that. Delete actor object.name. False, right? So it doesn't let us delete it. And just to prove that to you, let's look at the actor object. And you can see it's still there. So we can't, from now, since we sealed it, we can't delete the name property. And we also have another method, which is the object.isSealed. So if we want to tell, well, we tried to delete this property, but we weren't able to. How do we tell if it is the object sealed? Do we just guess, or well, no, we have this method here to see if the object is sealed. So within the object.isSealed, we'll pass the name of the object, which is the actor object. We can see that yes, it is true. So now it is sealed, and we cannot delete the properties within this object. All right, so that is how you can seal it. But in this case, you can still change the values to the properties. So let's just do actor object, name equals, well, instead of Mr. T, let's do alf, right? And then if we go actor object, well, we can see that we can change the values in the key value pair right here with the properties, right? So the name changed from Mr. T to alf, but sometimes, well, maybe we don't want to be able to even change the properties. So in that case, we want to use the object.freeze method. So just like the object.seal method, we'll pass the object into the parameters, and the name of our object is the actor object. Okay, so it is frozen. So let's try object.name equals, let's try to bring this back to Mr. T and see if that changed. No, look. So the name is still alf. So you may be wondering, if I see this in the wild, and I've tried to change the value in this key value pair, but it's not changing, is there any way to detect it? Well, yes, it's similar to the isSealed method. So we have the object.is frozen, right? And we pass it the actor object, right? And yes, we can see that it is frozen here as well. So these are two ways of kind of protecting your objects with the seal method to make sure that the properties cannot be deleted, and then the freeze method to make sure that they cannot be changed. That does it for the objects in JavaScript. This is a basic overview of objects. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comment section below. Thanks a lot.